It's clear that on this whole energy issue, governments, put simply, don't have a clue. Perhaps I should put it another way. There are people in government, and we'll come to this later in the program, who do know the truth about this global warming rubbish, but don't have the guts to prosecute the case. We've got energy ministers around the country, and the catch-cry is transitioning to renewables. They don't have the guts to say we can't survive without coal-fired power. And as you're watching this, as we said before, the heater's on, the lights are on, the TV's on, the computer's on. Over 80% of the power is coal-fired. Tonight we'll look at another energy source, nuclear energy. But it was banned in 1998 in Australia, another bit of government horse trading. If that had not happened, we could have delivered 25 nuclear power stations by 2050, supplying Australia with a third of its base load power. But I digress. In the energy crisis we're in, the rubbish political talk is we must transition from coal-fired power to renewables. In Canberra, Macquarie Street, Sydney, George Street, Brisbane, Collins Street, Melbourne, the seats of government, it's not only renewable energy, but your money massively subsidising it. And ministers in government sickeningly preaching the transition to renewables. Well, Bjorn Lomborg is a world authority on all of this. He wrote in the Weekend Australian, and I quote, "The reality is today, solar and wind energy together deliver only about 1% of global energy. The International Energy Agency estimates that even by 2040, these will cover a little more than 4% of global energy." He writes, one of the world's leading energy researchers, Czech-Canadian Václav Smil, has said, quote, "The great hope for a quick and sweeping transition to renewable energy is wishful thinking." Quotes Bjorn Lomborg. Former US Vice President Al Gore's chief scientific advisor, Jim Hansen, who put global warming on the agenda back in 1988, agreed, saying, and I quote, "Suggesting the renewables will let us phase rapidly off fossil fuels in the United States, China, India, or the world as a whole is almost equivalent to believing in the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy." Well, you've got politicians in Australia saying just that. You hear endlessly this rubbish about transitioning to renewables. As Bjorn Lomborg says, humanity has never experienced an energy transition, a shift from one set of energy sources to another set. Rather, we've added more and more. And of course, for us, the more and more that we should add is nuclear power. Well, more of that in this program shortly. But to get to that point, we have to dismantle this rubbish talk about renewables, wind and solar. Bjorn Lomborg is one of the most eminent thinkers on this subject in the world, the head of the Copenhagen Consensus Centre, and he said the only consistent development shift during the past centuries is the relative move away from renewables. In 1800, they provided about 94% of all energy in the world, dropping to about 14% by 1971. Well, here we are, with the International Energy Agency estimating that even by 2040, wind and solar will provide little more than 4% of global energy. Writes Lomborg, renewables have two big problems. First, they take up an amazing amount of space that often replaces nature. And secondly, and most importantly, solar and wind power are intermittent and unreliable. And as Bjorn Lomborg says, today they deliver about 1% of global energy. And as one of the world's leading researchers, Czech-Canadian Václav Smil says, the great hope for a quick and sweeping transition to renewable energy is wishful thinking. Simple question. Why are we paying massive salaries to people in government to get public policy so appallingly wrong, deceiving us with ideology, but worse, at massive cost to business, to individuals and to the economy? Quite frankly, some of these people should be in the dock.